The list of the most livable cities in Canada for 2023 is out, and it's a curious list. So let's take a look at what they came up with and see if it makes sense. And in the end of the video, we will discuss some criteria that, in my opinion, we should be looking at first and foremost. So this list was compiled by Globe and Mail. I'll say right away that these guys did a really good job developing a methodology that looked at almost 500 cities with a population over 10,000, and they looked at 10 categories and used 43 variables. The categories that they looked at were economy, housing, demographics, healthcare, safety, education, community, amenities, transportation, and climate. These categories I think make sense because all of these aspects are important to our well-being. So now let's take a look at this list. Let's go. So closing off the list is Halton Hills in Ontario. We actually looked into it when we were looking into buying a home. It's a really nice area, but we ended up completely eliminating that from our list. Fairly far away from the Greater Toronto area, and the train line is not fully electrified there, so commuting to downtown Toronto was going to be a bit of a pain in the butt. I think that in the 5 to 10 years, this location is going to be prime and it's going to make a lot of sense, but just not yet if you work somewhere in Toronto. We've got Niagara Falls, a bunch of Alberta and BC and Quebec. So Whitby, Ontario is number 85. Well, that's the city where we bought our first home. Personally, we think it's a really decent option if you want to strike a good balance between proximity to Toronto and nature, but also home affordability and some level of culture. Those were the categories that were really important to us personally. So Whitby is a really nice city, only 150K. It is kind of known as a place of older and retired people. That definitely stands true. A lot of our neighbors are older, retired people, but it's actually nice because it's a little bit less noisy and a little less busy than what we're used to in Toronto. Going through the rest of the list, so we've got Kelowna here, number 48. Kelowna actually made our list of the most affordable cities. It's good to see that there are some correlations to what Globe and Mail came up with and us. We have a good mix of BC, Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta here. So just scrolling through this really quickly, just showing you this list in case you don't get a chance to check it out. Check this out. Toronto, number 64. So Toronto is apparently one of the most livable cities in Canada, which I think makes sense based on the criteria that they've actually looked at. It definitely still not top 10, and I think one of the biggest reasons for that is the home affordability. The average primary real estate value is over $1 million. Other things, it actually scores much higher than average in Canada, maybe less so on the community side of things, although I would argue that's not the case. There's a lot of people who live in Toronto, a lot of people are moving to Toronto and are seeking to meet new people and find their own communities, so it's actually easier in Toronto to find your own community than in some other cities in Canada. Interesting fact, just recently there was another list published by The Economist. Toronto, in fact, made it to the top 10 of the most livable cities in the world. So it's interesting that Canadians don't even make Toronto their top 50 livable cities. I think it's a really curious thing. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that, or why you think there's such a big disparity between the worldwide indices and the local Canadian rankings. So moving on, Kamloops here in BC, very lovely place. Gatineau, Quebec. So that's just across the river from Ottawa, the Canadian capital. This is the French-speaking side. It's a nice, calm, very family-oriented city. Definitely would say that it's one of the more livable cities overall. Next, you've got Waterloo, Ontario. This city is center of the Silicon Valley of Canada because they have the Waterloo University, one of the best engineering schools and tech schools in the region and in the entire Canada. It's a very hip and nice city. We've actually been there with Anna. Very vibrant. There's lots of students in there. The average primary real estate value is just around $800,000, although they do say here is that it's a lot less walkable than the Canadian average. Majority of people have a regular healthcare provider here though. Moving on, so we've got Markham, number 50. So this is just north of Toronto area. Maybe not one of the most livable places because it's still a very, very expensive. In fact, it's one of the more expensive cities outside Toronto proper. 1.2 million. In fact, it's even more expensive than an average Toronto real estate value. So I'm not sure why it's scoring higher than Toronto. The healthcare numbers do seem pretty solid here for Markham. We've got Lévis in Quebec. Real estate is definitely really affordable here. How about that? $991 average monthly rent. But what you get for that price is terrible walkability, but good, still pretty good healthcare. Quebec City, number 44. Fredericton, number 43. Hamilton, Ontario, number 39. We considered living in Hamilton, although that was one of the far most cities where we were willing to potentially potentially move. We visited Hamilton a couple of times, looked at a couple of homes, but we decided it wasn't the right fit for us. It felt a little too industrial. It's also located on the shore of the Lake Ontario, but you don't get any access to the Lake Ontario because it's all in the industrial zone. So Hamilton is considered to be one of the more industrial cities, so there's a lot of production happening. If you consider moving to Hamilton, do keep in mind the neighborhood in which you want to live, because in some areas you can definitely still smell and sense some of that production exhaust fumes or whatever that they have there from their plants. Abbotsford, number 37. Average real estate value, it's a little bit higher than some other cities that we saw. Definitely scores lower on transportation, but healthcare still stays strong. I'm surprised that this ranking, just generally speaking, a lot of the rankings here have a pretty good healthcare coverage. Over 80% of people have a regular healthcare provider. We'll have to look a little bit deeper into how these guys calculate these numbers because I'm surprised to see such high numbers. Lethbridge, Alberta, number 36. Prince George, number 35. All these are the cities that made into our list of the most affordable cities in Canada. We're not going to go into too much detail about them. Make sure to check out our videos. Overall, all these are really nice, cute little cities with their own shortcomings, but also with their own advantages. Clearly, one of them being the livability and the cost of living. Vaughan, Ontario. So that one is also debatable. 1.2 average real estate value. The average household income, though, is higher than average, so maybe that's one of the reasons why they're placing it so high on the list. Oakville, Ontario, number 29. That is a really, really nice, cute little city in the west side of GTA area. Very nice lakeshore and very nice little cute houses. If you ever get a chance, definitely do visit and take a stroll and walk around the city. It's really nice. Edmonton, Alberta, number 27. Pickering, Ontario, number 26. Pickering is actually one of the kind of hidden gems of the GTA area. Not a lot of people love it because there is a nuclear plant in there, so maybe people are a little bit cautious about living next to a nuclear plant. Good news for you guys, if something does happen in a nuclear plant, the entire southern Ontario is going to be affected, so it's not going to be much difference whether you live in Pickering or in Toronto. The average household income in Pickering is pretty great, and it's really, really close to downtown Toronto. If you take a GO train, it's going to take you less than half an hour to be in the heart of the city. Ottawa is number 24. If you want to learn a little bit more about Ottawa, we actually made a big episode about the city. We visited it last year during Christmas, so we captured Ottawa in its most natural habitat. It was a snowstorm and freezing cold, so make sure to check it out if you want to experience Ottawa. Squamish, BC, number 21. So Squamish is a really nice city. When the pandemics happened, I have a couple of friends who actually moved to Squamish, and having visited it just earlier in May this year, one of the things that we've learned and realized is that Squamish is actually going through its own version of a rental crisis. It's almost nearly impossible to find rent in the city. It's become so popular and everybody was just trying to move there and looking for homes. So it's very busy with people who love outdoors, but also people who are able to work remotely. And you can see that here with the average household income being a little bit higher. Average primary real estate value, 1.2 million. Almost the same as in Markham, almost the same as in Toronto. Keeping in mind that Squamish is just a small city with 23,000 people population, and it's really not walkable. And it really is a really, really small city where you can only get around by driving. But the perks there is that you're just half an hour or an hour drive from Vancouver and about the same amount of time from Whistler. So if you're an outdoor junkie and you love the nature and skiing and snowboarding, that's probably the best place to live in, but it comes at a price. So Westmount is a city that's located almost inside of Montreal. It's one of the cities in Quebec that are almost fully Anglophone as well. It's also been ranked as one of the richest cities in Canada a couple of years ago. The average household income is almost $300,000. That's almost double than majority of cities that we've looked at in this list. Well, the prices speak for themselves. $1.8 million an average real estate value. How about that? The beauty of Westmount, though, is its walkability. I can definitely attest to that reasoning for ranking. Westmount is a really nice, convenient, and cute and very well-connected city. Safety can speak to that. Healthcare is a little bit lower than some of the less livable cities that we've seen, but I think that has something to do with the fact that Westmount is nevertheless in Quebec, and the Quebec healthcare overall is a little bit worse than in BC or Ontario. Vancouver is number 14. How about that? Still very debatable on why they call Vancouver the most livable city, with 1.6 as being the average real estate value, while people are making actually around the average and lower than majority of the other cities that we've looked at. These numbers just don't make a lot of sense to me. I guess what we have going on for Vancouver is that it's a very walkable city. It definitely is. It's very compact. Safety, I guess it is safe as long as you stay away from the East Hastings Street. Number 10, BC Oak Bay, population of 19,000, with 162,000 average income and 1.7 average real estate value. Again, I don't understand why this is considered one of the more livable cities based on these prices and this income. It's less walkable than many cities. Pitt Meadows, BC, 20,000 people. It has a good balance of different demographics. Average household income around Canadian average. Home prices are reasonable. Number 8, Calgary, Alberta, 1.4 million, with a slightly higher average household income and still pretty affordable real estate prices for now, although more and more we keep hearing that it's getting progressively worse because everybody's moving to Alberta and Calgary these days. So take these numbers with a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure they're already outdated. Number 7, Saanich, BC. I actually have never heard about this city. I'm really curious to see what it looks like. Let's check it. Ooh, okay, this is pretty. Any city in BC is very beautiful because of the mountains and the climate, but I wonder what's the deal with prices. Average household income is average. Average real estate, 1 million. Okay, maybe not so livable. Again, we're seeing a lot of the top 10 cities scoring lower than average in transportation and safety, and even lower in the healthcare than some of the top 50 or even top 100 contestants here. So really don't understand where this ranking is coming from. Number 6, we've got West Vancouver, BC. Okay, I can definitely speak to this one because Anna and I stayed in West Vancouver when we traveled to Vancouver. Absolutely love this place, but the biggest problem is that it's one of the most expensive cities in the entire Canada, and it's one of the least walkable cities in the entire Canada. There's just no way, they don't even have pedestrian lanes there. You just drive or walk on the road there. And you can see that through the average household income, like it's double than the Canadian average. And the average home price is $3 million. How is that livable? Okay, sure, almost everybody has a healthcare provider, but I do have a theory that places that have a high healthcare provision levels are actually places with a much older population. So those are the people who have lived in Canada or maybe been born in Canada and they already had a family doctor from the very beginning, and that's why they have a regular healthcare provider. That's not the case for a lot of newcomers or for a lot of people who are moving into Canada. So let's see what are the age demographics here. Primary household owners age 65 or older, so almost half of people in West Vancouver are definitely older people. So I think that's telling quite a bit about what kind of people live in West Vancouver and whether or not it's actually livable for the rest of us common folks. Number 5, Burlington, Ontario. We've also looked into the city when we were looking into buying a home. Population 200,000, a pretty well balanced overall demographic, not too many older people. In fact, there's actually more younger people living here. Average household income a little bit higher than average, and the home price is not the most affordable, but also not the craziest, I would say. It's definitely the less walkable city overall. Coming up to number 4 is Regina, Saskatoon. So Regina also made our list of the most affordable cities in Canada. We actually really like the way the city looks like overall. It has 250,000 people living there. The average age is definitely lower than the Canadian average. In fact, it only has 23% of people 65 and older. Definitely looking like one of the younger cities from this list that we've looked at. Average household income is a little bit lower, but what it has going for it is pretty affordable, $325,000 average home price. And you don't really hear any bad news from Regina, or am I missing something? 3, Winnipeg, Manitoba. Love it. Okay, I can stand behind that. Winnipeg being one of the more livable cities in Canada with a population of 800,000, it's definitely one of the larger cities, yet underhyped. We visited Winnipeg last year in spring. We really had low expectations. We were fairly surprised. It's a pretty walkable city and it's cute, it's nice. It has a really nice architecture with some Chicago-inspired buildings. Many people dislike Winnipeg, 2 major reasons, one being the higher than average Canadian crime rate and the harsher climate. But if you happen to fall in love with winter and get into winter sports or learn how to stay warm and make sure that you stay away from the bad neighborhoods, I think you might really enjoy living in Winnipeg. Coming up at number 2, North North Vancouver, BC. That is also a highly contestable ranking here. We have also visited North Vancouver. We absolutely liked it, but similarly to the West Vancouver, it's one of the most expensive cities in the entire Canada. Average household income, higher than average. Average home price, 1.4 million. Sure, it's a little bit more walkable than West Vancouver. I'll give it to you. And the drum roll, what is the most livable city in Canada according to Globe and Mail? It is Victoria, BC. Almost 100,000 population. It is considered one of the sunnier cities in Canada. It has a fairly young demographic and not the worst real estate prices in Canada. It's more walkable and more safe than the Canadian average. The healthcare access is definitely one of the lowest in the list that we've looked at. Victoria is a city I've heard so many great things about, although some people have mentioned that the crime has risen quite a bit in the last few years. Probably it has something to do with the fact that a lot more people started moving to Victoria. As it naturally happens with every single city on earth, the more people move there, the more starts happening there, including crime. So that's it. This is the list of the top 100 livable cities, with Victoria, BC being named the most livable city in Canada. This is a strange list because you see the rankings are all over the place. You have some of the most expensive cities topping the list of the most livable cities, while some of the cheaper cities with a younger demographic, with much higher walkability and healthcare coverage scores and lower crime rates don't get even in the top 50. One of the things that these guys have done is they haven't just produced the top 100 most livable cities, but they've also created some rankings using the regions as well. So if you guys are really interested in looking into this list into a little bit more detail, I'll leave the link below. One of the things that's worth looking into if you're a newcomer to Canada, they do have a ranking of the most livable cities for newcomers, so make sure to check that one out. If some of the criteria are a little bit more important to you than not, like for us, culture and walkability and the affordability of home prices were the more important criteria, and that's how we made a decision of moving to Whitby. You can do the similar thing in the full ranking and choose the criteria you prefer and see what that ranking actually looks like. So if I select access to healthcare, Whitby actually is in top 10 most livable cities, but if I select transportation, Victoria and Winnipeg and Vancouver actually are the most walkable cities, and I actually tend to believe that. This does make sense here, but in the grand scheme of things, what is a livable city? It all depends on you and what matters to you. So do let me know, which city do you think is the most livable in Canada? And thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please tap the like button below, share it with a friend who's thinking of moving to another city in Canada or to Canada. And if you would like to support our channel, make sure to check out the link to our Patreon below, or click the join button on our YouTube to become a channel member to help us make more and better videos for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.